You have to have the product that may have low number of reviews. And of course, you have to perform the market depth analysis. After you finalize all of those 15 or 20 products, you just choose 2 of them and start sourcing for your product. In case you have a low budget, for example, one of the most important things to consider would be definitely the cost of the product.
Bright Ideas episode number 352.
Hey, I know what'll cheer you up. Welcome to the Bright Ideas Podcast, where we let proven experts help you to find the next bright idea to implement in your business today. And now, here's your host, Trent Deersmith.
This is unbelievable.
Its true force has never been fully understood.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Bright Ideas Podcast. As always, I am your host, Trent Deersmith, and my job here is to find successful entrepreneurs and experts in the e-commerce business and help them to unpack the strategies and the tactics that they've used to become successful so that you can take those actionable golden nuggets and implement them in your business starting today. Today's episode is a sponsored episode brought to you by Ioscout, one of the Swiss Army knives of software tools for Amazon sellers. And my guest this time around is a woman by the name of Elle, who's got a complicated to say last name, which I'll probably butcher. So we're just going to keep it at Elle. She is the head of product at Ioscout. And we've produced this episode specifically for new sellers who have not yet got their start on Amazon and are interested in becoming a private label seller. So in this interview, you're going to hear Elle and I talk about trends that are going on in e-commerce, how to get started on Amazon as a private label seller. She's going to share with us things that she sees that are common to Ioscout's successful selling customers that the unsuccessful customers aren't doing. We're going to talk about best practices for sourcing products. In other words, mistakes that you want to avoid and things that you want to do right so as to give yourself the best opportunity for success with your Amazon seller business. One quick announcement before we get into the episode. If you haven't yet started to follow me on Twitter, I would encourage that you do so because I'm starting to create content on a consistent basis on Twitter that I'm not publishing anywhere else. Little blog posts published as Twitter threads where I'm sharing my best ideas on e-commerce, SaaS, marketing, and entrepreneurship. So be sure and check it out. It's just at Trent Deersmith on the Twitter platform. So with that said, please join me in welcoming Elle to the show. Hey, Elle, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for making some time.
Hi, Trent. Glad to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you here. So you are the director of product, as I mentioned when I read your bio, for a company called Ioscout, which puts you in a really great spot to be observant of trends that are going on in the e-commerce business, as well as the things that successful sellers are doing that unsuccessful sellers aren't doing. And that's what I want to talk about today. So let's start with the trends. What trends do you see in e-commerce for late 2020? Obviously that now we have hindsight, but going forward into 2021.
For sure. That's a great question, by the way, because we all know that consumption is changing. We know that the restaurants, travel, and luxury product sales are up to decrease. And for sure, e-commerce boom fuels record online competition. So in 2003, we had the SARS epidemic, and China unfortunately had to face serious limitations in traditional sales. So this pushed digitalization. Alibaba grew then, and other Chinese huge sellers grew. Now we see COVID pandemic, and for sure, this has changed our buying habit. So e-commerce sales are at an all-time high after the pandemic, and at the height of the pandemic, 10 years of e-commerce growth happened in just 3 months, in 90 days, So e-commerce is booming, and we are in the sweet spot, I would say, although we are in the middle of pandemic. And for sure, not only that, but the consumer behavior changes. Right now, instead of going grocery shopping, we would order some things that we never ordered home, and for right now, the customers and people who are basically making their decision about sales, what to buy, for them, fulfillment is definitely the differentiators. So, right now, today's brand has to have fast, free, sustainable for sure, and branded shipping. So in case, let's say, the customer has to choose whether to purchase a product, let's say with like 2-day delivery or same-day delivery, we would probably choose faster delivery. But of course, this all depends on the customer. Moreover, it's important to remember that retention becomes the top priority. As acquisition costs peak, we as the business face the same. Although, let's say, we are not an e-commerce business, but we face the same. The costs of acquisition right now is much higher compared to 2019. Nevertheless, globally, consumers and regulators are basically vary. And Google and Apple are to consider making it harder to target ads across channels. And at the same time, some of the experts are saying that one of the trends is basically the reduced cost of entry for basically traditional sellers, because right now the website development companies or some other companies are making the services cheaper. So it's much more let's say, it's not that expensive as it was before to build your own website, for example, because all of the industries right now are not in their best position. And definitely, yeah, please go ahead.
I was going to say, so in terms of categories, which categories, if someone's looking at either expanding their product line or starting a new business, what categories are you seeing an uptick in over the last quarter versus, say, the quarter a year earlier?
I wouldn't say that we have been on the market for too long. Nevertheless, a lot of things are, and some categories are definitely booming. For example, we all understand that everything that's associated with home, for example, would be higher in terms of demand compared to other categories, let's say associated with vacation or something like that. So definitely it's great to take a look at things like Google Trends, what people are looking for, or using some other tools, for example, in order to see what has been very popular among people. So this is something that in our case and with our users and with our customers, I would say that home improvement, for example, has been growing, and of course some other tools associated with home.
Okay, and grocery as well.
That's true, for sure.
And health and personal care, because we sell in those categories and we've seen nice lifts in them.
Yeah.
So for the folks who are listening who have been in the wings for a while and they're thinking, they haven't started a business yet, and they're thinking 2021 is the year that they want to be able to jump on the bandwagon, take advantage of this huge lift in e-commerce, which will probably create a sustainable lift because habits have been changed significantly thanks to COVID. What is required to get a private label business up and running on Amazon?
For sure. And this is also the trend. As I mentioned earlier, everyone wants to have fast shipping. Everyone wants to have something that is convenient. And in 2019, around $2 trillion was spent just in a year on marketplaces, So for sure, the best day is today to start an Amazon business, and customers will shop in marketplace rather than e-commerce stores because they understand that they can just, let's say, go and buy everything in one place. In our case, it's Amazon. To start an Amazon business, what's required? That's pretty simple. You can just Google, how do I start an Amazon business? And one of the first results will be Amazon.com, which will tell you where to start and what to do. And one of the things that basically they are saying is that, hey, make sure that you have the business model that you would like to go after, choose the plan, whether it's individual or professional. If we are, let's say, private label seller, in our case, we would choose the professional account, and just like make sure that you have all of the documents ready for starting your business. And after that, just start adding your products. But in real case scenario, we understand that in order to start an Amazon business, a private label Amazon business, you have to follow many more steps. Let's say if you have a product already, for sure, you know what to do. If you don't have the product yet and you want to start your e-commerce business, for sure you need to make sure that you are, let's say, selling something that will be sold, and you are investing money in something that will be sold. And the first step that all of the sellers need to make is to find the product that you are to source, that you are to basically sell afterwards. So the steps that Amazon themselves describe and the steps that a seller needs to take, a future seller needs to take, are for sure very different. And answering your question, Trent, for sure, it's important to have an Amazon account. That's probably the easiest step to take. After that, you need to make sure that you know what you want to sell, and you have the product to sell. If it's a private label product, you need to perform your product research, and you have to not only, let's say, just invest 20 minutes into that, but you need to do some homework. And I do believe that we're going to speak about that later on. Then you start selling. For sure, after you start selling, you need to invest money into advertising and into other strategies that would make your brand grow in terms of number of products and much more.
All right. And we are going to break that down a little bit further a little later here in the interview. But before we get to the strategies, for example, for sourcing products, which is obviously the very first and most important thing to do once your entity's set up and you've got your Amazon Seller Central account, we're going to get to that. Before then, I do want to ask you, in the position that you're at in Ioscout, you do get to see a lot of different sellers. And I'm quite sure that there are things that are common to the most successful sellers that the unsuccessful sellers aren't doing. What are some of those things?
Sure. So one of the things that I personally noticed, because I do customer interviews, and one of the things that we are very proud of is we speak with our customers, and it doesn't matter what time it is or where the customer is located, we would definitely speak with our customer. If we're speaking about successful Amazon sellers, what I personally paid attention to is that it's 100% dedication, and it cannot be, let's say, a side business which you invest time just like as a part-time job. Unfortunately, this doesn't work this way. And a good friend of mine, an Amazon seller, has to quit her job in order to become a top seller on Amazon. So, and this is one of the things that she did. Another thing is persistency. And of course, something that I also paid attention to is self-education all of the time. Even if you are a successful seller, things are changing constantly. The way that Amazon, how often Amazon adds changes their, let's say, policies and many other things are happening. So being, let's say, always on top of what's going on is definitely something that successful Amazon sellers are doing, and they're always up to speed of what's going on. And other thing that I paid attention to is definitely sharing expertise, because there are a number of Amazon sellers, and the ones who are, let's say, successful, they would share their expertise, definitely, let's say, not just like giving out commercial secrets or anything like that, but let's say they can spend 60 minutes of their time teaching other brand new sellers or sellers who have less expertise what to do, and definitely listening to other sellers and their issues, because you never know what's going to happen next, So this is something that I paid attention to in terms of like successful sellers. And another thing that I paid attention to is that the successful sellers never tell you that, look, I'm a great seller. I don't need anyone to tell me what's going on. And they also share their experience, because as I mentioned earlier, we haven't been on the market for as many years as other software companies out there. Nevertheless, we worked and we met successful sellers who just gave us feedback, and they told us, look, guys, that's great. Just do whatever you're doing. What you also asked me about the unsuccessful sellers, and something that I paid attention to is, probably that's the same with other, not only sellers, but the type of people who are selling. Look, I read a book about how to become an Amazon seller, and I know everything. So this is the type of a seller who already knows everything. He doesn't need anyone's help. He knows what to do, and he just blames everyone out there that the sales are not growing, or that's not probably the best time of the year to sell the product, or something like that. So that's where we are. Apart from that, another thing, unfortunately, that I faced with some of the sellers who are not doing as well as others is basically going after products which are rather trendy at this point of time. Because, face masks boom in March, and so many sellers ended up with those masks basically in their just garages and wherever they're storing the masks. And that's something that is very important. And this is something that you asked me about. What has been, let's say, what are the trends and the other things? So this is something that is very important to see where your product will be, let's say, in the next 3 to 12 months time, because you don't want to be just end up with the inventory that's never going to be sold.
So let's talk about some best practices for sourcing products, because if you can't get that part right, nothing else really matters. Because, and I'll use myself as an example. 5 years ago, when I started on Amazon, I initially tried to start as a private label seller before I ultimately became a successful reseller. And I transitioned because I didn't know what I was doing in private label. And my first 2 product selections were horrible. And it really didn't matter how much money I spent on ads. I was never going to organically rank because the competition was far too stiff. And as a result of that, I was never going to make any profit. And that's what caused me to be incredibly frustrated, and ultimately led to the transition to my being a wholesale reseller, which for me worked out really, really well. That said, it actually is a pretty good business model if you can make a go of it with private label, because your margins are higher, you're in more control of your brand, plus you have an asset that you can sell for more money when you don't want to do it anymore. So, best practices for sourcing products. Let's walk through that.
Sure. So I just recently shot a video on how to, let's say, find the product. And for sure, if we had all of the time there, we would probably be talking about that. But I'm going to stop here. And of course, we have to understand that there are some elements of profitable product opportunities, which are high demand and low competition, price, which is, as a lot of, let's say, consultants or trainers are saying, it's between $15 and $70. It's important to take into consideration the profit margin, the market depth analysis, and possibility basically to be private labeled, because some products can never become private labels, 2 more things that are important to consider, of course, the BSR, the bestsellers rank, and the number of reviews of those products. So some of the things that are important to consider, there are some general product types to avoid, which you don't want to end up with. For example, easily breakable products, for example, hazmat, some things like, I don't know, accessories, replacement parts, because they may become obsolete. Definitely you don't want to go with products that have patents, because you're never going to make it. And some of the steps to begin your product selection is basically to begin the process by identifying preliminary products. Because, of course, it doesn't, as you mentioned earlier, it's not just one or two products that you want to look at, but there's many more products that you want to consider. You use your criteria to find products for preliminary evaluation. For example, like I mentioned, the price between 15 and 70 US dollars, the weight, the size below the oversized limit, for example, the BSR of over 100, because you're never probably going to make it to the first 100. And you can go
100,000.
For sure. I'm speaking about for the initial product search, it would be better to look at the products with BSR of over 100, not 100,000.
Okay.
And you can go to Product Finder if you're looking, for example, for products in Ioscout, and use just one category or several categories. Then you're evaluating your preliminary products by looking at the market depth of each. So the idea is that we are looking at the market overall, not just at top selling products in the niche, for example, and you're just deciding what keyword and how your potential buyers are going to find your product. For example, you're just typing in the keyword and you're looking at what is available out there. Moreover, you are creating a snapshot of the overall market for the product and evaluating the revenue, for example, and the reviews in order for the market to pass it to the next step. So after you have created, for example, a list of 100 or less products, you have to end up, after performing all of those steps and analyzing the depth of market or market depth, you end up with 15 products, for example, or 20 products. And you can evaluate each and every product and take a closer look at them. So you have to understand, as I mentioned earlier, this takes time. Sometimes this is the step when a lot of sellers or future sellers just end up very frustrated because this takes time. And it's important to have the product matching, let's say, the following things. Product cost should be low, profit margin should be high, the return on investment should be high, and something that is important and a lot of sellers don't consider, they have to understand their return on investment, and to do that, you have to take into consideration the price of the product, the cost of the product, which you can look up, for example, on Alibaba or any other website where you're planning to source your product from. You have to have the product that may have the low number of reviews, and of course, you have to perform the market depth analysis. After you finalize all of those 15 or 20 products, you just choose 2 of them and start sourcing for your product. In case you have a low budget, for example, one of the most important things to consider would be definitely the cost of the product, because you don't want to end up spending all of your money on just the product itself without, let's say, putting aside money for marketing, for example, or for shipping, or for anything else that's required.
As a rule of thumb for a new seller considering going through this process and launching 2 products, including the cost of the first order, as well as the cost of the promotions and advertising that are going to be needed to get the product to get traction, assuming they've made a decent selection, how much money per product do you think that they should budget for?
Well, that's a great question. And I would answer that 2,000 up to 5,000 would be the average budget that we're looking at. We do have, let's say, sellers that had less than 2K, but if we're speaking about private label, unfortunately, that's an average amount that you have to consider. For sure, there are businesses, there are private label sellers that spend more than 10K, but it doesn't
label sellers that spend $100,000 launching a product. And those are the guys who are also doing $100 million a year in sales.
For sure. Nevertheless, we understand that it doesn't matter what your budget is. You have to consider all of the things. And let's say the first package that you're to order and your first, let's say, number of samples that you can order and other things. Because if, let's say, the budget is the key differentiator and something makes you make the final decision, for sure, you have to consider cost. If you have more money, cost would probably not be the thing that would make you go after the specific product for sourcing. Nevertheless, it's important for our listeners to consider that there are different things that you can keep in mind. And we suggest not only looking at just one or two products and only looking at just one product when you're analyzing the products available out there. But it's important also to see what is available and what are, let's say, products that may be alternatives to the product that you're looking to sell. For example, if a lot of consultants and a lot of Amazon teachers speak about garlic press, for example. We have to understand that they come in different sizes and shapes, and all of those sizes and shapes have to be considered in order to understand if you need to go after that product or not.
Mm-hmm. Makes a lot of sense. In terms of the way product sourcing has changed now versus a year ago or so, do you think there's been any significant changes, or is the process about the same?
To be quite frank with you, we don't see too many changes at this point of time. There were issues at the beginning of the year when there was COVID outbreak in China in terms of the delivery times and the shipping times. But that was probably one of the things that changed compared to 2019, if we are to say about 2020. In other things, no, we haven't we haven't seen any changes, to be quite frank with you.
Okay. What are some of the biggest mistakes you see people making, especially the new people, when it comes to sourcing products? And I'm sure there's plenty of them.
Going all in, to be quite frank with you, because we already spoke.
Is that what you want to say? Going all in? Okay.
Yes, that's what I said. By that, I mean, we have a seller that has 5K that he spent, let's say, working 9 to 5 as, and then he wants to become an Amazon seller one day. So he quits his job and he just spends $5,000 on all of the inventory. And you can guess where this brings him.
Nowhere.
Well, for sure. And apart from that, this is one of the common mistakes that we see. Another thing that I also mentioned earlier is definitely going after something that is very trendy at this point of time. Face masks is an example, hand sanitizer is another example. And this is also something that let's say will end up, may end up nowhere, because sometimes the trend may be very, it's not one day trend, but it may last for some time, At the same time, this is something that has been crucial and that has brought a lot of negative experience to the sellers. Another thing that I also paid attention to, and I was in the call with our seller who was using our product. And one of the things that's important to consider is making sure that you're working with good suppliers. Because if you're working with not very reliable suppliers, very bad things may happen. And that supplier may just well, you don't want to know what's going to happen. And that's the reason why it's very important not just to go with, let's say, just an unreliable supplier, and you haven't seen, let's say, the samples, or you just, or the supplier doesn't have any reviews or something like that, but they have a very good price, for example. So this is something that is very important to consider as well. And it's also important to understand that apart from just, let's say, everything that's associated with the product itself, it's also very important to understand that there are extra money that you are to spend. For example, there is budget for marketing, there is budget for shipping, and if the seller is not, let's say, based out of the US, but he's an FBA seller, it's also very important to consider that. Moreover, it's very important to consider, let's say, if the seller chooses not the FBA model, but the FBM model, it's very important to consider the price of shipping for example, international shipping. So, and this can be not very popular for just an Amazon user to purchase the product, and the cost would be more expensive than the product itself. So it's very important to consider that as well.
Okay. So Ioscout, we'll finish off with this. Who is Ioscout? Like, what does your software do, and who are you most suited for? Who's the ideal customer?
Fantastic. Great question. So we are what we like to call ourselves an all-in-one tool for Amazon sellers. And we have more than 10 tools available in Ioscout. We have the product finder tool, the product tracker tool, the keyword research tool, as well as sales estimator, FBA calculator inbuilt in the product. We offer Google Chrome extension and other things like reverse ASIN, and inventory management, and much more. So we are suited for, I would say, any type of Amazon seller. It may be a newbie or a more experienced seller. Nevertheless, we welcome everyone. And I would say in terms of, the type of business that we go after, we may be a good fit for wholesale, we may be a good fit for private label, and of course, arbitrage. So I would say we are a one product fit at all. Nevertheless, the best thing is, of course, to try out the product.
Mm-hmm. All right. So folks, we're going to be doing a live stream here in a couple of days. You'll be able to get more information and to register for it by going to brightideas.co/ioscout live. That's all one word, Ioscout live. You can register for the live stream there. And in that live stream, there's going to be a more comprehensive demonstration of the software. I'd imagine there's going to be some type of special offer for the Bright Ideas audience that you can't get elsewhere. So if you've been thinking about getting your business started on Amazon and you're looking for an opportunity to increase your knowledge about how to do it correctly, as well as become more aware of some of the powerful software that is available, I would encourage you to make sure that you carve out time to attend that live stream. And again, you can find that at brightideas.co/ioscout live. Elle, thank you so much for making some time. It has been a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thanks, Trent. Have a great one. Bye.
Thanks very much for listening to the Bright Ideas Podcast. Check us out on the web at brightideas.co.
All right, show's over. I'm tired.